Oh, yep. Thank you, Drew. So my name is Brian O. I work for Permit Sonoma, County of Sonoma. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We have quite a packed agenda. We also have some new faces joining us as well. So why don't we do a round of introductions? I will turn it over to Janet to introduce herself and her team.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. I'm Janet Spillman. As soon as I'm done here, I'll put in SCTA after my name on the screen. And it would be helpful if all of you did that too, so we just have a good idea where you're from. I'm the planning director here at SCTA. Drew Nichols is the person who makes these meetings happen. Hey, Drew. Tanya's the climate programs director. Did I get your title right?
Director of Climate Programs, yes.
Thank you. Ross Clendenin is relatively new to SCTA, RCPA is community affairs person. I didn't get that right either, did I? What's your title?
I believe it is marketing and communications specialist, but I'll answer to either. All good.
Okay, thanks. We have Dana Teray. You'll probably all know Dana, Alternative Transportation. And Chris Barney, he's our data guy. And BC, where is BC? There's BC, RCPA. And I think that's it for SCTA, RCPA.
Great, thanks, Janet. Why don't we go to our committee members, and I'll just do a roll call here. City of Cotati.
All right, Noah House, City Director for Cotati.
Cloverdale.
Hi, Kevin Thompson.
Good morning.
Oh, we got two of us on here.
There we go.
I'll go first. Kevin Thompson, I'm the Community Development Director and Assistant City Manager.
Hi, Rafael Miranda, Associate Planner.
Rafael. City of Roanoke Park.
Jeff Beiswanger, Planning Manager.
Welcome, Jeff. Healdburg.
Morning, everybody. Scott Ivan, Community Development Director.
Morning, Scott. City of Santa Rosa, Jessica Jones.
Everybody, Jessica Jones, Supervising Planner.
And
So,
I saw Amy.
sorry, also from Santa Rosa, Nancy Adams in Transportation Public Works.
Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Amy Nicholson, Senior Planner with Advanced Planning in Santa Rosa.
Good morning, Amy. And we have Windsor.
Hey everybody, Patrick Streeter, CD Director in Windsor.
Welcome, Patrick.
And then we've also got Kim Jordan.
Kim Jordan, Planner, Town of Windsor.
Good morning, Kim. Sebastopol.
Hi, good morning. John Jay, Associate Planner with Sebastopol.
John, and City of Sonoma.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. David, the planning nerd in Sonoma.
Welcome, David. And we have some of our agency representatives here as well. ABAG MTC.
Hello, Ada Chan with ABAG MTC.
Hi, I'm Kara Vuicich with MTC. Here to tell you about the proposed transit-oriented communities policy.
Welcome. And Smart.
Hi, Emily
With
Betts.
Smart.
Sorry, Chris. Hi, Emily Betts, Principal Planner with Smart.
Welcome, Chris and Emily. And Caltrans.
Hi, this is Orlando Ramirez with Caltrans.
Welcome, Orlando. And then I see Amy Lyle from City of Santa Rosa has also joined. Good morning.
Good morning.
And our rep from the Napa Sonoma Collaborative.
Morning, Jane Riley, Napa Sonoma Collaborative. I'll just do a brief update towards the end of the agenda.
Excellent. Thanks, Jane. Okay, let's move to item number 2, approval of meeting notes from December 16th. Any items for discussion or a motion for the meeting notes?
Move to approve, Noah and Katati.
David second, Sonoma.
All right, so moved. Okay, let's see, Janet, can I turn it over to you for the SCTA RCPA meeting schedule for 2022?
Janet, you're muted.
Can't hear you, Janet.
On page 5 of the agenda, you'll see the entirety of the SCTA RCPA meeting schedule. It's just here for your information.
Thank you, Janet. And then I think C to that would be the staff roster, right, for information only on the following page.
Yes, thank you for that. We just wanted to make sure we knew who's attending, and that I didn't put your contact information on this document, but we will be sending out an email verifying your contact info. There's been some turnover, and also sometimes we get the addresses wrong. So if you could let us know if this is correct or incorrect, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Janet. Okay, item number 3, election of officers. SCTA's ordinance number 3 requires that a chair and a vice chair be elected at the first meeting of the calendar year. Officers must be members of the PAC. There are no term limits. The current chair is myself, Brian. Janet, can you provide just a little background on this? I don't believe we have a vice chair, right?
No, we don't. So it would be great to have a vice chair for those meetings where you cannot attend, Brian, or where the chair cannot attend. Like I said, in the agenda, there are no term limits. We just need to formalize this every year.
Great. So why don't we open it up for discussion? Any interest for either of the roles?
This is David. I'd like to nominate Ada.
I'm not officially a member, so but thank you.
That was my point, Ada.
Nice try.
I'm happy to help out as a vice chair. If Brian would like to stay on, I'd love to be able to work with Brian. I just can't promise every month, but I'm happy to chip in if anybody else is not interested.
Brian, I thought you've been doing a great job. You should just keep doing it.
I would be happy to continue and support the PAC in this way.
Okay, so it sounds like we have nominations for chair and vice chair. Any discussion about that? Any other nominations?
Thank you both.
All right, thumbs up. We're formal around here. All right. Thank you, Brian, for your service so far and for your service to come. We appreciate it. And David as well. We look forward to that.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome. Let me know, Brian, ahead of time. I'm sure we can figure things out.
Okay, will do. All right, let's move to item number 4, transit-oriented communities policy, a discussion led by Kara from MTC.
Hi, everyone. So I do have a relatively brief presentation, so let me go ahead and pull that up. And my thought was that we can go through that, and then I'm very happy to have questions either during the presentation or after, whatever works best for everyone. And first off, I want to thank you for giving me time on your agenda. So very much appreciate that, and very much look forward to getting more feedback on this proposed draft policy. All right, so moving right along. So for today, I wanted to provide you all with some background and context on the proposed draft TOC policy, give you an overview, talk about some of the key issues in policy development, our request for input, and then the next steps. So I think as some of you may know, MTC currently has a transit-oriented development policy that was adopted in 2005 that really focused on, or that applied to specific named projects in MTC Resolution 3434. Most of those projects have either been built or under construction, and so because of that, and because of some pretty significant changes that have happened in land use policy and law, both at the state and regional level, the Commission was very interested in undertaking an update to the TOD policy. So we started work on that really in earnest towards the end of 2020. We had a technical advisory committee that we convened that consisted of local jurisdictions, county transportation agencies, some of the larger transit operators and a few of the smaller ones, as well as some other transportation and housing organizations. We then presented an initial draft policy proposal to the Joint MTC Planning and ABAG Administration Committee on January 14th, and are now in the process of soliciting and really seeking much more detailed feedback from local jurisdictions throughout the region. So I do want to emphasize that this is very much still in development. And so what I want to talk about with you today is at least some of the initial ideas for the policy, and then also share with you some of the feedback that we've gotten to date. So far, we've met with planning directors in Alameda County and Contra Costa County, as well as some individual cities. So I'm very happy to share that with you all too. All right, so just as a little bit of additional background and context, as I think most of you know, Plan Bay Area 2050 was unanimously adopted at the end of last year, and it really provides the basis for the proposed transit-oriented communities policy. The draft policy proposal seeks to address multiple Plan Bay Area strategies, but it really focuses on two strategies that are focused on increasing the number of households near high quality transit, particularly affordable housing, housing and affordable housing near high quality transit, and increasing job concentrations near high quality transit as well. So really what the policy is then trying to do is link that to our major transit investments in the region. And so the idea is that where we're making major investments in high quality transit, and we're using the state definition of high quality transit, which is different types of rail services, including commuter rail, other types of heavy rail like BART and Caltrain, light rail, bus rapid transit, and then frequent bus services that are 15 minutes or better, at least during the peak periods. And really tying those investments to, again, Plan Bay Area strategies. And so you see the proposed TOC policy goals, again, focus on increasing residential densities for new development and prioritizing affordable housing in transit-rich areas, increasing commercial densities. And again, we're actually really talking about office, particularly, and increasing job densities in transit-rich areas, particularly near regional transit hubs, to improve accessibility, to improve the transit accessibility of those jobs. And then the third goal actually kind of goes beyond that typical half-mile or 10-minute walk to prioritize bus transit, active transportation, and other shared mobility to and from transit-rich areas, particularly to equity priority communities that might lie outside of that half-mile area. And lastly, to support and facilitate partnerships to create equitable transit-oriented communities within the region. So next, just a quick overview and comparison of the 2005 TOD policy and what's being proposed for the transit-oriented communities policy. So as I said before, the 2005 policy only applied to specific named projects. It set minimum corridor level housing thresholds by transit mode. And those thresholds, in terms of the number of housing units that either were already in existence or planned and zoned, had to be met before funding for the project was programmed or allocated for construction. So the proposed TOC policy actually builds and expands on the 2005 TOD policy. It focuses on priority development areas and transit-rich areas with planned transit investments. So all of those areas. And by planned transit investments, we're talking about not just expansions and extensions, but also major improvements or upgrades as well. And it has requirements for allowable residential and office densities, affordable housing and anti-displacement policies, parking management, and station access and circulation. And so next I'll go into a little bit more detail on those proposed requirements and talk about some of the feedback and that we've gotten to date, and some of the things I think that we're thinking about as we move forward with revising these. All right, so for the proposed density requirements, the policy would specify residential and commercial density ranges, and again, commercial really being office, for future growth around high quality transit. And the density ranges are tied to the level of transit service that's available in a particular area. And I've grayed out the first two tiers because for Sonoma County, we're really talking about tier 3, not tier 1 or tier 2. So, so I think for your county, that's really going to be the relevant category. And so some of the feedback that we've heard about this particular requirement is, one, to go with the lower ranges, the lower end of the range, and to set up the requirement as an allowable density that would be calculated as an average over the station area. And by allowable density, what that would mean is, for example, on average in a station area, up to 35 units an acre per net acre would need to be allowed, but projects could also come in and be approved under that amount, under that density as well. So that's, you know, some of the initial feedback that we've received on this requirement. But again, this is definitely something that we want to talk further with local jurisdictions about, particularly given the range of land use types and diversity, not only across the region, but even within a station area itself. All right, so moving on to the proposed requirements for affordable housing and anti-displacement. I won't go through all of these, and I will send you all a copy of the presentation after the meeting too. What these really focus on is trying to ensure that either as an overlay or within the jurisdiction, that there are policies in place that really focus on affordable housing production, preservation, and protection. And some of the initial feedback that we've received on this is that, particularly for some communities, you know, preservation and protection may be less of an issue, and they need some additional options in addition to the ones that we've listed on the slide. So we're currently working with Ada and other folks on her team on developing some of those. Also looking for, you know, certainly looking for feedback from cities on this one as well. So for proposed parking management requirements, and again, these are actually tiered to the levels of transit service, similar to the density requirement. What I'm showing you here is what would apply for tier 3, which is essentially, you know, in Sonoma County, that would be commuter rail and maybe some bus services, is that there would be no parking minimums for either residential or commercial. There would need to be provisions for allowing shared and unbundled parking, adopting a TDM policy for new development, and providing a minimum amount of secure bicycle parking. Again, one of the concerns that we've heard about this proposed requirement, particularly with respect to eliminating parking minimums, is that for some locations, there's a lot of concern about externalities and spillover parking. And so one of the things we want to do is, you know, for those communities where eliminating parking minimums may not be something that's feasible quite yet, we want to provide some additional options and alternatives for ways to really manage and not oversupply parking if eliminating parking minimums is not something that's, you know, quite ready, the community's quite ready for yet. And then the last requirement, again, kind of goes beyond that half-mile station area and is really focused on transit station access and circulation. So, and I think, you know, this is what we've seen in a lot of recent stationary plans or specific plans where there are policies or design guidance that really prioritize shared mobility and active transportation to and from the station area and within the station area. For rail and ferry stations in particular, we would like to see some initial mobility hub planning and really taking advantage of the pilot program that MTC has started just last year to also include an access gap analysis to really get a thorough understanding of where gaps in that 10 to 15 minute bike shed, walk shed transit access should exist so that those can be prioritized for future funding and implementation. And then again, we're working to further provide further definition and explanation for these, and also provide further guidance for exactly how equity priority communities that might be located outside of these station areas should be prioritized in these access considerations. All right, so that's a very high level overview of the proposed requirements and some of the feedback that we've gotten to date. So some of the key issues that we're really, I think, grappling with as we move forward with revising the policy, and I think some of the things that we're really looking for feedback and input on are, the idea of when it comes to policy implementation, how should funding be used? Should it be something that should funding be conditioned on policy compliance? Should funding really be focused on as an incentive for policy compliance? Or some combination of both, and then what's the timing and phasing of policy implementation? With the 2005 TOD policy, the focus really was on conditioning transit project funding with policy compliance. And given the expansion that we're proposing with the TOC policy, there's been some questions raised as to whether or not that's appropriate. So that's a big question that we're exploring as we move forward with this. For the policy requirements themselves, a key issue is balancing simplicity and the ease of interpretation and implementation of the requirements, along with effectiveness, and then being able to accommodate the land use complexity and diversity across the region, but sometimes within a single station area itself. And then lastly, resources available for policy implementation. So including, if the policy is adopted by the commission, what can we do to provide additional assistance to jurisdictions with planning and technical assistance so that we can really focus on making sure that everyone who needs to comply with the policy can do so. All right, so areas, how we would like to gather additional input. So we're, as I said, we're currently seeking feedback from local jurisdictions. We are in the process of putting together a brief survey to try to get a better understanding of kind of baseline planning and zoning in areas that would be potentially subject to the TOC policy and how that compares with the proposed requirements. And we're also looking to put together a working group of smaller and more suburban cities that might be subject to the policy to discuss the proposed policy in more depth. And we anticipate probably 1, maybe 2 meetings of that group. And so if any of you might be interested, please do feel free to let me know here, or you can certainly follow up with me after the meeting too. And then my last slide is our next steps. So really in the end of this month in March, we're continuing to focus on outreach and really getting more feedback, particularly from local jurisdictions. Are planning to present to the ABAG Executive Board on March 17th, and then reconvene our Technical Advisory Committee either March or April timeframe. We're planning to go to the MTC Policy Advisory Council in April, and then to start work on developing a final draft policy that we anticipate bringing back to the Joint Planning Committee and then to the Commission in the May-June timeframe, most likely closer to June. And that concludes my presentation. And I see there's a bunch of chat messages, which I haven't had a chance to look at, so I apologize.
Kara?
Yes.
So let's, why don't we go to the questions here in the chat? Gotta scroll up a little bit. It's like there was a question from Jane about info regarding headways.
Yeah, that meet that criteria. Yeah, and that's really a category. I think that's a big question as to whether or not it should even be included in the policy, to be honest. And this is an issue that's been raised by some other jurisdictions as well, because as I'm sure you know, with just regular bus service, headways can be increased, but then they can also be decreased. And it's a little hard to, which makes it more difficult to plan development around a service that might be cut back due to reasons beyond beyond anyone's control. And so I I think that's a question, that we would certainly appreciate your feedback on as well, is if that's, if folks in Sonoma County also feel that just, increases to regular bus service should be something that's excluded from the policy. Yeah, and off the top of my, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you had that slide that talked about fixed rail, light rail. So it looked like from the way that policy was written in your interpretation that SMART is not included in that category.
Well, SMART would be part of tier 3. So commuter rail is that tier 3 category. And again, because typically commuter rail is not nearly as frequent as light rail and BART or Caltrain, and it also doesn't have the same kind of usual connectivity that those other services do, which is why it's kind of at that lower tier. So the idea with the tiers of transit service is that for essentially transit service that's not as frequent, maybe doesn't have as big of a network, that the expectation is that densities would be lower. So I think so really what we're talking about for Sonoma County would be smart stations, and then it would be at that lowest level of requirement. Does that answer your question, Amy? Okay.
Emily, you have your hand up? Emily, can you hear it? All right, let's go, while she gets settled there, let's go to Noah. And then Jeff.
Hi, Kara. Thank you for the presentation. Super interesting. I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head in finding the challenge to draft policies that fit all the diverse communities in the Bay Area. And, we even have that issue, I would say, even within the communities of Sonoma County. Cotati versus Santa Rosa were just really different. So just to go down your policies, no parking minimum it just won't fly in Cotati at all. I promise you that. The density requirements, even your minimum exceeds significantly any of our density except in our downtown. So one idea might be to try to do some type of North Bay carve out or rural community or suburban community carve outs, just getting along the lines of the tiers that you're looking at. But I mean, for us, we would need more flexibility to be able to take advantage of it, or just we won't be able to take advantage of it. I really like the transit station access element, because I do think that's a key thing for us to get more people to be able to use our smart stations, frankly, and be able to get access to those things is to require some of that, and then to focus some policies on basically expanding that access. That's pretty much it. It's very different. The policies are very different and challenging to fit into Cotati in most of our communities, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback on that. Well, I guess actually I have a follow-up question for you. So if density was and assuming, so let's say for example that we're really talking about smart stations in Sonoma County, and it sounds like from what you said that an average of 35 units an acre allowable would be too high. Like what would you suggest as an alternative that might work?
I'm going to probably be drafting an update to our station specific plan in the next year, and I'm thinking 25 to 30 is what is going to be the most acceptable to our community. And also, just given our station is kind of a unique situation, it's in a weird kind of cul-de-sac surrounded by another jurisdiction, so we don't have a lot of options to deal with all these unique things. But that's what I'm thinking would be the highest level that will work for Cotati.
Okay, no, thank you.
Go to Jeff.
Yeah, I think some of my comments are along the lines of what Noah was saying. We've been working with a series of developers to try to put together plans for our little downtown Station Avenue area that's right next to a smart train. And yeah, along the lines, it's, you know, maybe 35 dwelling units per acre would be really dense for Rohnert Park, and we might get that at that area. A 2 FAR for office is crazy high, you know, to surface park, and even if we got rid of all of our parking minimums, developers on their own are going to want parking, and
Yeah,
we've
which
had
is
developers,
fine.
yeah, we've had developers look at structured parking in order to get a little bit higher parking ratios. And then if that's not financially feasible, they need to go to surface parking. And if you know your development math, it's like you really can't get higher than a 0.4 FAR with surface parking, just for, and I'm not even talking about our minimums. I'm just talking about what the market demands for a developer isn't going to build an office building unless they have parking for their tenants.
Yeah.
So, and we aren't quite there where we can convince everybody to ride around on their bicycles and take SMART. But we you know, we hope we can get there eventually, but we would have to be connected internally with all the cities with really good bus service and other things first, which we don't have. So we still are unfortunately reliant upon the automobile in the interim. So anyway, I think I would just say maybe you want to test some of these ideas with developers if you haven't already, and just see if they would actually build a project under these scenarios.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, lots of discussion focused on SMART. So why don't we try to go back to Emily from SMART here?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, Kara, thanks for coming to present to this group. I do have a lot of questions. You know, it's an interesting situation having a new commuter rail system in the North Bay, right? This is an area that hasn't had commuter rail in 60 years. So the travel patterns aren't in place yet to support a rail system, right? The land use doesn't exist. People are used to a suburban lifestyle and used to driving everywhere. So it takes time to change those patterns. And as you know, the whole TOD thing is just chicken and egg, right? Like we can't fill the trains and we can't run buses with 10-minute headways until we have the density to support it. You know, on the other hand, we need to make sure that we can get funding and support for higher density developments in order to support the transit. So, you know, I am concerned about differentiating between like different types of commuter rail. You know, SMART runs half-an-hour headways under normal conditions in the peak hour, just like Caltrain. So I'm not sure about that part of putting SMART in Tier 3. Particularly because it's a new service that's still expanding, right, and growing. And I don't totally understand the funding implications of this policy. I need to dig into it more, but I just would hate to limit funding that can come to North Bay developments that would like that level of density, you know, just because we're such a young system and haven't gotten there yet, if that makes sense. Because, yeah, I mean, as you know, these developments last a long time, right? So we just have one chance to build the right type of development around the station. So that's my plug for looking long term at what SMART can do in the North Bay. And also, yeah, I would be happy to be on your working group if you would like commuter rail representation for the North Bay.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. And I think that you know, that is actually an issue in some other locations in the Bay Area too, where there's new rail services coming online, where, you know, it's this challenge of how do you transition areas over time, don't lose the opportunity for higher development that might be possible in the longer term, you know, once transit is established and you've got, you know, the supporting transit services in place, and at the same time not preventing development. So yeah, definitely happy to try and talk more about that and figure out ways that we might be able to address that issue. Yeah.
Thank you,
Emily. I was wondering who was going to use the chicken and egg analogy, given proximity to the North Bay. So plus one on that. All right, Jeff, is your hand up again, or is that still up?
No, sorry. I just never put my hand down.
Okay,
I'll
just
do
making
right
sure.
now.
Are you, this is Kevin in Cloverdale. All you guys have transit stations. We're putting in density near our transit, but no one has any, I mean, just, this is not me talking, but no one has any faith that the train will ever make it to Cloverdale, or it's so far in the future. So we've had our challenges. We had that project that finally got approved, but we've heard a lot of that type of discussion.
That's a great point. Kara, I had just a quick question about, many of us currently are doing different variations of outreach on our housing element. And so the topic of housing policy is very relevant. On one of your slides, you mentioned some additional outreach. And so I was curious to know if that's specific to working with cities, or do you intend to have a more broader discussion with the community in the North Bay?
No, it's really more focused on cities in terms of getting feedback from cities as to what menu items essentially should be on that housing policy requirement, list of housing policy requirements. So the way that we, and sorry, I didn't explain this very well, I realize. For the affordable housing policy requirement, we set it up as essentially a menu of options. And so the idea would be that in order to comply with the policy, a jurisdiction would sort of, look through the list and choose, and enact those policies, or already have them enacted, that cover, preservation, protection, and production that are appropriate to their jurisdiction. Some of the feedback that we've heard is that at least for the protection and preservation list of policies, there need to be some additional policy options added to that list, because the ones that we've generated so far aren't necessarily going to work in some jurisdictions. And what we're doing is working with Ada and the other folks on her team to make sure that we're consistent across the work that they're doing for housing technical assistance, and whatever we're kind of putting together as potential policy options. And then any further information and guidance on those policies that would go into the TOC policy. Yeah, so it's more focused on really kind of the jurisdiction level, or the staff level, I would say.
Thank you for clarifying. So we'll make sure to get the presentation materials. I saw a few dates in there for deadlines, and then get that circulated across the pack shortly after this meeting. Thanks, Kara.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. All right, bye.
All right, let's move to item number 5. Definitely has some relevance here, the Sonoma County, or the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy Update. And I believe we have a presentation from BC and Tanya.
I'll let BC take it away.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. Can you, first, can you hear me, and can you see the slide deck?
Yes to both.
Very good. Okay, let me make one last change here. So thanks for having me this morning. I am going to be, wanted to give a brief presentation here on work that Tanya and I and others here have been working on the last couple of months, and kind of report back to this committee on kind of previous discussions we've had. So I wanted to, there are a couple of key, items I wanted to hit on here. I wanted to present an update on our policy priorities for the upcoming year that were just adopted by our board on Monday of this week. Wanted to give an update on the bans on the construction of new gas stations that are being worked on by a number of the different jurisdictions. Wanted to give an update on the greenhouse gas inventory we're working on. And then I had a question at the end based upon an inquiry that came in from one of our directors about solar permitting software. So first off, this here is a list that may be familiar to many of you. Tanya and I presented this list to this committee at your last committee meeting. And so these are a list of the 6 items which were adopted by our board at this previous Monday that we will be using to focus our work for the remainder of this year. It has work. I'll run through this really quick. We have been looking to do work on energy reach codes, providing support as we can to jurisdictions that are interested in implementing reach codes for this upcoming year with the changing of the building code cycle as of January 1st of next year. Number two, we are looking at strategy documents that can be developed that would look for making greenhouse gas emissions reductions in existing buildings. Number three, or actually wait, on number two, really quick, I think the one minor change on this item since the last time it was presented to this committee is really the introduction or the incorporation of the word equitable as part of the building electrification strategy. That's something that's really, we're using a City of Berkeley document for some of our guidance on this. And they really have integrated equity and equity pillars really at the core of that strategy. We think that that's really important to carry over here into Sonoma County. Number three, this one has had a slight revision since the last time it was seen by this committee. We are looking at the overlap between our climate mobilization strategy and the comprehensive transportation plan. And at the board meeting on Monday, it was pointed out that there is also an incredible amount of overlap with the Vision Zero Action Plan, which is also being developed by SCTA. So we are going to be looking at the overlap of those three planning documents and looking at how we can get synergies between the three and the work that we are doing on both sides of our organization here with SCTA and with RCPA. Number four, looking at areas where we can, again, working on reach codes, but specifically focusing on EV charging stations and providing support to jurisdictions that may want to encourage charging stations installations, specifically at workplace charging and multifamily housing. We believe are the two main focus areas for that work. Number five, looking at development of urban forest conservation plans and tree protection ordinances, looking at what resources that we can collect and provide here and feedback to you all as you think about what makes sense for your individual jurisdictions with working on updating those documents. And then the last one is keeping track of all of the general planning update work that's being done and looking at areas where we can, where climate and equity focused adaptation can be kind of integrated into those plans. So that one is really, there's a lot of depth there and we'll be kind of looking at, first step really will be just keeping a catalog of all of the current planning activities that are going on. Before, actually, let me keep moving and then we'll take questions at the end and I can come back to any of these slides. Next up, I wanted to give an overview of my understanding of where work is currently being done on bans on the construction of new gas stations and the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. On this, when we get into discussion, I'm really interested in I guess, fact checking to make sure that I have the current understanding of where all of these are. And this is my best understanding. As far as City of Cloverdale, I do not believe that there's been any official action taken yet.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. City of Cotati, there's a draft ordinance being developed by the planning department staff, but not an official date that's been set for that to be heard yet.
That's correct, BC, but we plan to have it in place by the end of this fiscal year. So July 1st, it should be fully adopted.
Very good. Thank you, Noah. City of Healdsburg, no official action taken yet.
That's correct.
Very good. City of Petaluma, they were the first out of the gate and have the permit ban was approved as of March 1st of this previous year. City of Roanoke Park, their city council heard an item on January 25th of this year and approved an immediate moratorium on accepting new permits for gas stations. And the direction was given to staff to move forward with drafting an ordinance for a permanent ban. City of Santa Rosa.
And I just typed in an update on that, BC. We're going to the Planning Commission next Thursday with for a recommendation on ordinance.
Hey, that is fantastic news. Fantastic news. Thank you. City of Santa Rosa, this was last discussed on February 9th at their Climate Action Subcommittee. with the subcommittee kind of giving its support for the current plan as presented, and would be moving to the Planning Commission next. City of Sebastopol is working on a draft ordinance. The draft ordinance was approved by the Climate Action Committee in September, and then the Planning Commission in January. And I believe is looking for an anticipated vote by the council in April of this year.
Correct.
Very good. City of Sonoma, no action taken yet.
Hey, BC, can
Yeah.
this is David with the City of Sonoma. Can I ask a silly question?
Yes.
Is it within the realm of possibilities that a jurisdiction could not necessarily have a local ban on the construction of new gas stations, but put a limitation on the expansion of existing gas stations and only have that as the action? Or is it one versus the other, or both? I'm not sure. Thank you.
I think that is all dependent upon what your local jurisdiction and what your council is most comfortable with. And wants to, that's a decision for I think for each jurisdiction to make. We kind of, the recommendation from our board is looking at really not allowing permits for any new construction of new gas stations. But in the end, we're in an advisory role here and an encouragement role. And so I think that that's really going to be whatever you think works best for your jurisdiction and what the council is most comfortable with.
The reason for my question, BC, is because I believe the first draft that I saw had two components. One, there being a ban on new construction, and also infrastructure for additions or remodels. And what this is telling me, what I'm seeing here on this chart, is it's just simply a ban on new, not necessarily that second component. And that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Very good. So that is a good point. I think because of the brevity of the way I've titled the slide, a lot of the actual ordinances, and I'm pulling together examples and could easily share all of the ordinances that have been adopted so far. They really are those. It is those two parts of it. A, not accepting any new applications for construction of new gas stations, and B, putting restrictions on the expansion of additional infrastructure. And really one of the key things that came up in one of the most recent discussions I listened to was with a new gas station or expansion of infrastructure, if that entails putting in new underground fuel storage tanks, that's an investment, and that is a large capital investment and probably has a 30 or 40-year life term. And that's the type of expansion that we're really kind of, I think, looking to restrict if at all possible.
And I can chime in here just because we just went through the exercise of updating our ordinance. And our ordinance is a little bit different because we didn't really have a gas station category. We had a service station category, and we didn't want to ban all service stations. But so we specifically are just banning petroleum fueling pumps. So that would be, you can't add new pumps to an existing station, and you can't create a new station, which obviously would have new pumps. So, and we had to put a little carve out there for hydrogen, because we have had some interest in the past to build a hydrogen fueling station, which, if you don't write your code correct, you might inadvertently ban hydrogen fueling stations, which is zero emissions. And I don't think we want to do that. So anyway, so that's just a little bit of insight from our code. And that's, and if you go to our website, you can download that staff report on our Planning Commission page.
I will also, following this meeting, I can also make, as part of the minutes, I will, or at least communication to this committee, I will make available the archive that I've been keeping of all of these current ordinances that can be used then as reference as you're thinking about what you want to implement for your jurisdiction. So moving on, I'll just go ahead and finish this list here really quick. Let's see, Town of Windsor was heard by the City Council on November 3rd, and direction was given to move forward with drafting that code.
That's correct.
Great. And then in the County of Sonoma, there's been no official action taken yet, but the item did come up, I think, in an unscheduled fashion as part of the discussion on January 25th, and there appeared to be kind of broad support for moving forward in some fashion from a majority of the Board of Supervisors. And that's now sitting with Permit Sonoma, I think, for figuring out what would be the most appropriate next steps there at the county scale. So I think that is my kind of round take, kind of my quick take. Thank you for the updates you provided here. If there's anything that's factually incorrect on this table, please let me know either now or via kind of follow-up communication, because I'm trying to keep this up to date on a regular basis. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on then to the next item. I want to give a brief update on our community-wide greenhouse gas inventory update that we're working on. This is an update that gets done approximately every 2 years. The first one was done in 2010, updated in 2015, then in 2018, and now we're working on an update using 2020 data. There was also, as part of the 2010 effort, there was also a backcast that was done to 1990, which is has been used basically in accordance with the state legislation with AB 32, using that as the baseline year. So I'm currently collecting data. I wanted to thank everyone on this call who I've been in communication with recently about getting access to your PG&E data. I've gotten those authorizations from 9 of the 10 jurisdictions. Just waiting to hear back on one last jurisdiction to get release of the PG&E data. I've also gotten the electric data from Sonoma Clean Power, and I'm working with Terry Crowley in the city of Healdsburg to get their municipal utility district data. Getting a little bit of feedback there. So then that's kind of starting off first on building energy kind of analysis, moving next to transportation, solid waste, water and wastewater, and then fertilizer and livestock. On all of this, we're following the models that have been kind of the model that all of the previous inventories have been done on. And this is all based upon the ICLEI community greenhouse gas protocol. Our work here is scheduled for completion in June or July of this year. And I'm potentially looking for ways that we may be able to share some of our preliminary results internally with our jurisdictional contacts here, even before the publication of the actual report. That came up yesterday in a phone call with Healdsburg as to some of the information would be useful to receive even before the end of the fiscal year. So I'm just looking at ways that we may be able to provide some of that preliminary results prior to the publication of the report. Only one, yeah, I'll leave that there. And then the last question I had, this came up as an inquiry from our, one of our directors earlier this week. And I just thought this might be an appropriate place to ask. She was asking, she had recently learned about the Solar App Plus permit software that can be used to process solar PV permit applications. And I just wanted to find out if any jurisdictions, local jurisdictions, are currently using that and may be able to provide some feedback on the value, the pros and the cons of that software. Not intending to get into a major discussion today, but be very much interested to hear which jurisdictions are using that software, if any are. So, and here I'll go ahead and leave that question on the table, and I'll just go and wrap up really quick. Wanted to say thank you. Both Tanya and I are here to answer any questions about the topics here that I just presented on. And if there's anybody that has information on the Solar App software, it would be much appreciated just to hear your experience. So thank you.
Thanks, BC.
Hey, Brian, quick question. This is David. BC, is that presentation available on the link somewhere?
It is not, but I will make it available as soon as this meeting ends.
Thank you very much. Saves me doing some more camera work.
Sure.
They never look great either.
All right, thoughts and comments? Maybe?
Just briefly, we're not using the solar app, and I don't. I know a couple jurisdictions in Napa are, and it's intended to automate kind of the submittal and issuance process for solar building permits. We have, we're so small. We have, we do a fair amount of them, but it's pretty straightforward. And BC, something to be thoughtful about is, the maximum amount you can charge for a solar permit is capped by the state. So if there's a cost associated with that app, then it's probably not going to be worth it to us. We had a similar inquiry, or someone recommended it to us, and we're going to start looking at it. But because of those factors, I don't know how far we're gonna get down that path. And then just to give you some feedback on your efforts. So one of the things we're telling our council is that we want to wait to see what the building code changes are going to be before we run with too many changes on top of those, because we want to eliminate redundancy. So anything you guys can do to start to build out a matrix to show, the proposed CBC changes, and then other places where you all might have some recommendations, that would be helpful, just to kind of target efforts. With regards to EV charging, what would be great for me is if the county could, and all the jurisdictions could have a consistent standard for, like, multifamily housing should provide X amount of charging per unit, or based on bedroom counts or whatever. And then the same thing for commercial, maybe office, industrial, retail. That would be helpful, and I think very beneficial to everybody in the county if it was just a standard threshold or consistent amount of charging. That way, it wasn't a question and wasn't unique by jurisdiction when we get individual applications. And then also, because of the kind of skill set and knowledge base that's required to come up with those standards, you guys might be in the best place to do it versus a bunch of us doing a lot of individual resources or research. And then just lastly, on the tree thing, one of the things that would be most helpful is if there was a countywide mitigation program, because right now, if you cut down a tree without a permit, or even if you do, sometimes we collect a mitigation fee, but we don't have a good mechanism to spend that money on replanting trees. And we don't always have the best locations either. But again, if there was a countywide way to do it and program, then we could just hand our money over, and then the trees would get planted, and then the carbon sequestration would happen. That's kind of, I think, one of the most beneficial changes that we could see as a small jurisdiction with limited resources and land availability.
Very good. Thank you. Very good suggestions.
Right. And BC, I'll put you in touch with someone from building, just to share some experiences on the app.
Hey, that's great. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So we still have a ways to go on the agenda. So just to time check, we're at 10. So we're an hour in. How are folks feeling about needing potentially a 5-minute break? Should we power through? Any strong feelings one way or the other?
Hey, Brian, David, why don't we get an estimate of time on item 6, 7, and 8, and then we can kind of decide from then?
Sure. I mean, I don't think we have any amount of time set for them, but
I can help with that.
whoever's leading each of those, maybe you can just general sense how
Sure.
much time.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Item 6 won't take long. Item 7 is just for information. We don't have anybody to speak to the guidelines. And then item 8 should take a little while for Chris to get through that.
Yeah, I dropped in the chat about 5 or 10 minutes, maybe more if there's discussion.
On item 6, how long, Janet? 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes?
5.
Go.
I say let's power through it.
All right. I don't see any opposition, so let's do it. And if anything, we bought ourselves a few minutes there of a little break there. So let's move to item number 6, Janet, to talk about the Vision Zero Action Plan.
Sure, thank you. I will make this short. The Vision Zero action plan has been, the draft action plan has been before our board earlier this week. They had some comments and questions, and we are still taking input on the plan until the 21st, next week. Is that next week? Yes, it is. Wow, time flies. Okay, so we really appreciate if you haven't already commented or you'd like to comment again, please just click through. You can either send comments directly to me or you can use the comment here button on the website. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them about the Vision Zero action plan.
Thanks, Janet. Also, I think to note on the 21st, I believe it's a holiday, right? So it's really, you're probably looking for feedback before the end of the day tomorrow, Friday, with President's Day coming up.
Forgot about that. Yes, thank you.
All right, so that'll be at the top of everyone's list. If there's any leftover comments to provide. Thanks, Janet. Item number 7, informational, to talk about how all of these different items are tied together with funding opportunity ATP Cycle 6 guidelines.
Right, we don't have any, I've just attached them here for your information.
Oh, great. Okay, so it's there on page 20 or 19, it looks like. Thanks, Janet. All right, moving to item number 8, SB 743 implementation, vehicle miles traveled, a discussion I suspect will be led by our fearless leader on all things VMT, Chris Barney.
Yeah, for better or worse, right? Good morning, everyone. So just a couple updates on SB 743 and VMT. First off, I wanted to give a brief update on how things are going on the VMT mitigation and reduction calculator project. And let me go ahead and share my screen. I can walk through the agenda from the last steering committee meeting. So just give a quick update on the project. We held the first steering committee meeting on February 1st, and we're able to talk with the project team first about existing features in the tool. So the VMT mitigation reduction calculator tool will be based on a tool that was developed for Sandag and also adapted in Alameda County. So talked a little bit about that. If you see the agenda that's included in the packet here, there's a hyperlink to the tool documentation for the Alameda tool. So we're expecting our tool to look a lot like the Alameda tool. So there's a lot of really good information in that documentation as background. So we also are digging into mitigation measures that'll be included in the tool. And the idea here is the project sponsor will calculate the generated VMT for a project. If it is not meeting a threshold, it'll need to be mitigated somehow. And so that's where this tool will be helpful. So the user will be able to plug in a number of different mitigation measures and determine how much, be able to quantify the reduction from those mitigation measures. So just to provide some information on what we're looking at right now, Fair and Peers put together this long list of mitigation measures for VMT and GHG reduction. And these are all primarily based on the CAPCOA 2020 GHG reduction guidance document that was released last year. So here you can see a long list of different mitigation measures and an indication of whether or not they're included in the Alameda tool and whether or not they're quantified. So the reason that these are called out is there's actually, in most cases, background research and information to help quantify these. So it's defensible under CEQA. So this is the list we're working with now. Would really, if you're interested, encourage you to take a look at this list and provide any comments on whether or not anything's missing or if any of these just seem too far out there for Sonoma County. So we'll be revisiting this again in March at another steering committee meeting. The last item that we've been working on is looking at place types for Sonoma County. And the idea here is most of the research that's been conducted looking at GHG and VMT reduction is really focused on more urbanized areas and less on very rural areas. So Fair and Peers is helping us identify different place types, looking at urban, suburban, and rural areas, and how that could affect different mitigations. So I do have a draft map I can share just to give you a sneak peek. A link to this will be going out to the steering committee very soon, along with the request to schedule the next meeting. But this just shows you kind of how things are looking after the last draft. So you can see the green and blue areas are suburban and urban areas where the tool could be applied. The gray areas are more rural, where the mitigations in the tool would just be advisory, but not necessarily backed up with very tight research. So that's how things are looking right now. We were able to incorporate PDAs and urban service areas from the county in that as well. So that is one piece that'll be going out for review very soon. So that's it for the VMT reduction calculator. Right now, next steps are reviewing those place types and then getting the steering committee back together in March to talk about mitigation again and to review those place types. So happy to answer any questions about the calculator. If not, I can dive into the updated VMT summaries. And I don't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen. So someone let me know if there are questions in there. I should be.
Hey, Chris, this is Noah and Katati. Can you just expand on the anticipated CEQA process for this?
So, yeah, so what Fair and Peers has been telling us is that any VMT mitigation or reductions need to be backed up with substantial evidence. So if a project comes in and uses the calculator to calculate those reductions, it needs to have some sort of research, hopefully a number of different studies that are providing substantial evidence to kind of back those VMT reductions up. So that's kind of where we're at with the defensibility under CEQA of the VMT reductions. So did that answer the question?
Well, maybe. So it sounds like there's not going to be any specific CEQA work done on this by SCTA. It's more providing the menu of potential options that then the individual projects can analyze as a part of their overall CEQA analysis.
That's right. Yeah. And Fair and Peers, the team at Fair and Peers has kind of pre-screened the list of measures that'll end up in the tool to determine the, whether or not it would count as sufficient evidence in CEQA. So they've made that judgment call as experts on VMT and SB 743 implementation.
Okay, one thing that might be helpful would be as these kind of the matrix is created or menu, whatever we're going to call it, if links to some of that substantial evidence can be included in that would be super helpful for actually being able to utilize these as project specific mitigation.
Yeah, and that's a major component of the tool. Each of those mitigation measures that's in the tool, it includes a bibliography with all those sources, hyperlinks if they're available. So yeah, I think that's a really important part, right? Having that backup information. So yeah, we'll make sure to make that as easy to access as possible in the tool and documentation. So yeah, thanks. Appreciate that comment. So if there are no further comments, I'll go ahead and jump to the updated VMT estimates. So these have been updated based on a, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Do you mind zooming in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, maybe one more if you can.
One more. Okay, let me try and center things. There we go. Yeah, trying to fit everything on one page. So apologize for the size here. But I've updated our jurisdiction level and countywide VMT estimates because we've made a number of improvements to the travel model. So wanted the VMT estimates that we've published to reflect those. One of the major changes we've made is we've revalidated the travel model to 2019. So the base year is now 2019. We've checked the results against 2019 traffic counts, transit ridership, and updated the land use to reflect that as our base year. We've also updated and improved the population and employment formulas. So previously we were using a countywide persons per household rate. We've changed that to actually a jurisdictional specific rate using census data so we can get a better localized estimate for population. We've also changed the employment calculation rates to match state EDD data. Previously, we were relying primarily on ABAG estimates for employment. So we've checked that with a few other data sources as well and made a few changes to the calculations based on those other sources. One other thing that I have included here is information from the regional travel model from MTC, including a San Francisco Bay Area regional average here. For the efficiency metrics of residential VMT per capita and employment VMT per worker. So I would note that the employment VMT per worker number here is quite high. And I've discussed this with both MTC and our modeling consultants at Fair and Peers. And we've determined that that number is high because MTC is including a lot of VMT in their calculation that's not commute or work-based VMT. So I'm working with Fair and Peers to come up with a good solution for that so we can provide a MTC region estimate for that number. And we're looking at a few other alternatives there to provide a more, provide a estimate there that's more of an apples to apples comparison. So more to come on that. The actual number will be a lot lower, probably in the 15 or 16 range. So that'll help our mapping and some of our estimates if you're using a regional average for MTC. Along with that, I'm working with Kevin from Fair and Peers. I'm putting together a technical memorandum talking about how we calculate VMT in the travel model, putting information like these descriptions for the different calculations in that paper, and also including some recommendations on what to do about regional averages and different options. So working with him on that, it'll be a co-author document with all of this background information and documentation all in one place. And we want to get that up on our website. So it's a resource that you can access in one place that's not scattered between a lot of different staff reports and reports. So that's where things are at with VMT estimation in the travel model. So again, happy to answer any questions or provide more information if there are any requests for that. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, hi, Chris, David from Sonoma. I'm looking, what year did you base your populations on? Because my population is, as of January of this year, is 10,924. It's not a lot off, but I'm just wondering, number one, that question, then number two, does it really have that much of a material effect if, the population changes, or did you use like an average or projection of some year in the next couple of years or something?
We've actually used the ACS numbers to actually update our conversion factors. So the one place that'll make a difference is when we look at the residential VMT per capita. So if it's higher or lower, it'll shift that number and it'll actually shift things on the VMT screening maps. So if you can send me the estimate you have, I can plug it in and kind of shoot back a quick response that kind of outlines how that changes things and how that may change the map. So, but yeah, happy to use additional data sources to make that more accurate if you have something that you trust or prefer to use.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what other directors think, but I typically just go to the demographics research unit of DOF.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you're probably familiar with that. So that's all I was going by, Chris, but I was more interested in your second part of the answer, and that is how it may or may not have an impact on residential.
Yeah, if it's a big change, it'll make it quite a difference. If it's, you know, a couple of percentage points, it may not make a huge difference. But yeah, go ahead and send me the number. I can plug that in and I can show you kind of how it changes the number on the chart, but also how it may change the maps too, just a before and after. So I'd be happy to plug that in and we can dial that in.
Yeah, I don't know about other jurisdictions, but the last 2 years under DOF, we've lost population, not massive amounts. You're talking less than 1%, but you know, I don't know what trickle down effect that would have across the countywide. That's all. I'll send you the file, Chris. No problem. Thank you.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Chris, just generally, how much has this shifted since the previous year estimates?
It's pretty similar. I think some of the biggest changes is the overall VMT numbers roughly the same between 2015 and 2019. It went up very slightly. I think some of the biggest changes were our total employment number for Cloverdale was quite a bit lower in the previous version. So we were able to true that up using the EDD numbers to get a better reading of employment on Cloverdale. And just changing the population multiplier by jurisdiction instead of using a countywide rate has helped us get closer to the actual population number for these jurisdictions. And one thing to keep in mind is this is for the sphere of influence. We look at sphere of influence in the model to kind of correct for annexations over time. If we look at the city limits, things jump kind of strangely when we go between the base year and the forecast year because of those annexations. So if things look a little high, it's probably because it's including the sphere areas. But yeah, just one thing to keep in mind. So yeah, just to come back to answer the question simply, the population employment calculators are probably the biggest changes.
All right, I'm not seeing any other comments or hands. Thank you, Chris.
I see a question from Steve in the chat. How do these numbers need to change to meet state, national, and international targets? That's not really a technical question. You know, certainly to meet those targets, the VMT needs to go down. So I think that's more of a rhetorical question. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, Steve.
Oh, that's fine. Just we need to realize that.
Thanks, Steve. All right, let's move to item number 9, standing updates. Everything from member updates. We have a representative from our housing collaborative, Napa Sonoma collaborative, and then a report out on what's being discussed at SCTA board.
Guess we don't want to all start at the same time, eh? This is David. Just want to kind of throw something out there for discussion if other people have got experience with it. My last planning commission meeting, we were having a discussion about requiring a residential component in our commercial zones. So in other words, if you are building a 10,000 square foot project, 50% of it has to be residential, making it mandatory. For the last 20 years, it's been a component that has been waivable upon the request if certain findings can be made. But I'm wondering if other jurisdictions here have heard of such a concept. It's something that's supported at our planning commission. We'll be going in there with some fine tuning on the language, but again, it does require the ability for a project, a commercial project, to have an equal amount of square footage for residential uses, and they can possibly fee out of it, but that's something that we're going to be discussing once we do the policy work. So anyway, that's all I had in Sonoma for now. Thank you.
Thanks, David. All right, any other updates? I'll just mention quickly, tonight, so actually this afternoon, we are presenting the winery events ordinance to our planning commission. So this is a continuation of a public hearing that started back in June of last year. And so looking forward to make progress there. And then I'll have to quickly shift gears this evening. We're having our scoping meeting for the Sonoma Developmental Center this evening. And so just FYI for, I think I'm looking here at City of Sonoma in particular there, just as a heads up on that.
Hey, Brian, thanks for sending that out. By the way, I forwarded it to our council members about tonight, so you may have some of our politicians, planning commissioners as well. We'll see. I'll be in attendance, so thank you for sending that out.
All right, Jane, any updates in the collaborative?
Yeah, hi everyone. I have quite a few updates. First, just some administrative stuff where ABAG has requested that we be holding our meetings monthly rather than every other month. So starting from March forward, we'll be holding the collaborative meetings monthly. If you can't get to all of them, that's okay. Get to the ones that you can. A reminder that any jurisdiction can call either Luke or myself or email at any time, whether you're looking for technical assistance or to find some resources, or you have some ideas of things that the collaborative ought to be doing, pick up the phone or send us an email. I have kind of a personal request that our Sonoma members kind of reach out and engage with our Napa members whenever there's an opportunity to do so. We really want our Napa members to have the kind of collaborative experience that Sonoma planning directors have been having for many years. So if you see an opportunity, please reach out and take it. There's a bunch of new stuff out for the Regional Housing Technical Assistance Program. I could let Ada talk about that. It's going out in a newsletter for you guys tomorrow or Monday, so you'll get all that. I do want to call your attention to a survey that's been developed by EMC Research to better understand residents' feelings about housing and related issues. And I want to call your attention to that because it's available in 5 languages. So it'll be, if you want the survey created for your jurisdiction, you just send an email to like RHTA survey, and yeah, Ada's nodding, with the name of your jurisdiction, and they'll share that for you. So that's a great opportunity for some additional outreach, especially in languages that you may not know you have in your community. So wanted to make you aware of that. And then the SB9 stuff is out with the infographics and that sort of stuff on the webpage as well. Recent webinars, we had the January collaborative meeting with the Sonoma ADU Center, and I think we have that recorded somewhere. That was a really, really informative one. There was a webinar on new APR requirements with HCD that you can go online and watch, and also the Keep Calm and Certify On lessons from early adopters. Don't let that frighten you too much. It's going to be okay. So for the collaboratives work, the equity working group, I know everyone's really anxious to get some stuff out of the equity working group. The second meeting is taking place tomorrow. The last session is on March 15th, so they're coming really quickly. We do share the minutes with equity working group members, after each meeting. The plan is to make them available to all the members, and I find them really useful because you get a sense of what everyone is saying and what issues we're looking for. And these are CBOs that serve populations that we really want to get input from. So let us know how you'd like to receive those. Do you want them emailed to you? Do you want them dropped in a shared location? How do you want to do that? Or do you just want to wait for the report to come out? We are targeting March 22nd for the final report out from the equity working group. On the regional fair housing analysis, we are holding weekly meetings with the lawyers committee. There have been some delays from from cities not getting in the information that's been requested. And we've stopped asking for that. Now the lawyers committee is going to be contacting those cities directly if they need additional information. And if you haven't provided it because you don't have what they're asking for, they may be able to find a way to get some other information that's going to fulfill their needs. So they're just going to be contacting you directly. Please respond if they contact you so that we're not holding up the entirety of the report. The template, we put together a template for the jurisdictions to use if they want to for their fair housing analysis. We've just gotten feedback yesterday back from the lawyers committee on that template. So we're going to be incorporating that, and the template will go out either today or early next week. It's got a whole lot of prompts in it. Some of them are HUD prompts, some of them are just the HCD prompts. You don't have to do all of it, but it looks pretty intimidating, and the fair housing analyses they're big and they're complex, and the template reflects that. We still expect to see an administrative draft of the fair housing analysis, the part to meet HCD standards, so the AFFH part, by early March. The bulk of the fair housing analysis, the part that's needed to meet the HUD standards, that's going to be a month or so behind. And the lawyers committee will be presenting that to us early March at the collaborative meeting. On to the last thing, the developers panel. We've contracted with a firm to create the interactive mapping product. We were working with Samaya to do the HES tool and using it, incorporating it as much as we could in our work. And we're all really excited about that. And then one of the staff who happens to have a practicing attorney stepped in and said, nope, we don't want to do this. So we ended up contracting with the firm to do it. And the reason behind that is because we want to protect people's draft work products. I mean, the whole idea for doing this is to have jurisdictions be able to try sites, right? Put them in, see if developers would be interested in them. If they're not, well, then we don't use them in inventory and we try something else instead. So we want you to be able to have the flexibility of that and not have everyone saying, oh, these are all the sites that the jurisdiction is going to use, because that's not what the function is. That will be what the function is of this product eventually, once it's gone into HCD, or if you want your sites out earlier, you can do that as well. But eventually this is going to be a public facing tool where affordable housing developers can look and find sites that are going to be appropriate for their projects. Right now, it's a very inward-facing tool, and we want to keep it that way right now as we're building it. So, still in the development stages. We're right now finalizing the survey questions and kind of the visualization options, because we want it to be really simple for developers to use. A reminder that if you want to take advantage of that opportunity, you'll need to provide either APNs or addresses of the sites that you want to have looked at, and again, those sites, giving those to us does not make them public. It does not commit you to using them in inventory. This is meant to be a tool to help demonstrate market feasibility and developer interest per the HCD requirements for use of non-vacant sites or for use of sites that have been used in previous housing elements. We're targeting the end of February to have the draft of that, and we should have a demo available of that at the March collaborative meeting as well. And that's your update.
Thank you, Jane. Sounds like lots going on and lots centered around that March meeting. So definitely make sure that we're checking our calendars for that one. Thank you.
Jane, could you email out the link to the survey options and I would appreciate seeing the meeting minutes from the equity working group.
Absolutely. Well, I think the newsletter with all the links is going out tomorrow, and I'll ask Luke to include the
That's perfect.
Minutes as well. I find them very helpful. I think you will too.
Thank you, Jane. I will turn over to Janet. So either, are there any items you'd like to cover from the 14 February SCTA board meeting?
No, this is just here for your information. This is what was discussed earlier this week. We'd like to keep you in the loop. And then I believe the the planning and activities report is also in there. That's specific to the planning department. And what Chris and Dana and I have been engaged in the last month. I pointed out to the board specifically safe routes to school, and of course, all of the work that Chris is doing with y'all. Once again, Vision Zero is still in the works. First draft was reviewed on Monday. Second will be reviewed on March 14th. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. And you can find said report on page 39 of our agenda packet. All right. Let's go. I see any members of the public. I see phone number 415. And also I see Steve there as well. If you are a member of the public and would like to provide comment, please raise your hand or just unmute yourself. All right, seeing none. Oh, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate everybody on the what we saw today. It's forward looking, and I really appreciate being able to get a bird's eye view of what's going on. So thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for your contribution as well. Okay, so our next the next SCTA meeting is March 14th, as Janet just mentioned, and our next PAC meeting will be April 21, 2022. And so let's move. Any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, David.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Janet.
Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.